My cousin, Brandon, stole $12,000 from our grandma and then pointed the finger at me. My entire family believed him, and I became an outcast overnight. It took 3 long years, but I eventually exposed his lies in court. I never thought my own cousin would betray me, especially not over money that belonged to the one person who loved us both unconditionally. But grief, I've learned, has a way of revealing people's true colors, and the truth about my family was a lot more painful than I'd ever imagined. Before all this, we seemed like the perfect family. We had Christmas at Aunt Linda's, 4th of July barbecues at Uncle Mike's, and summer vacations to Lake Geneva. On the surface, we looked like one of those picture-perfect suburban families you see in cheesy Hallmark movies. But if you looked closer, you'd see the cracks. Aunt Linda constantly pitted Brandon and me against each other, always praising him and questioning my life choices. She dominated every family gathering, like a queen with a plastic crown and a wine glass that never emptied. My mom and her younger sister would just smile too hard at Linda's insults, trying to keep the peace with gritted teeth. Our anchor, our protector, was Grandma Ruth. She was the only one who saw through all the pettiness and still managed to love everyone despite it. She made Sunday dinners feel sacred and knew how to make you feel important, even when the rest of the world treated you like background noise. Grandma was my biggest supporter, especially after my dad left when I was 12. She'd come to my school plays, help me buy secondhand suits for interviews, and slip me cash when she knew Mom was too proud to ask for help. She never missed a birthday or a milestone. When she got sick, I was the one who took time off work to care for her. Brandon, on the other hand, didn't even visit her in the hospital until the 3rd week of her chemo, claiming he was too busy with internships. Yet, he was the one who ended up with the biggest slice of the inheritance. Grandma passed away in March 2020. We had been preparing for it since late 2019, but it didn't lessen the pain. COVID had just started locking things down, so the funeral was a small graveside service with masks and awkward elbow bumps instead of hugs. I delivered the eulogy, barely making it through without crying. Brandon showed up late, wearing sunglasses and a Rolex. He gave me a bro hug that I didn't return, acting like we were still kids sharing bunk beds at Grandma's lake house. But the moment she was buried, something shifted, and the whispers began. 2 weeks later, Aunt Linda called me. "You need to return the money, Logan," she said. At first I thought she was joking. "What money?" I asked. She sighed in that condescending, disappointed way she'd perfected. "Don't play dumb. We know you accessed Grandma's estate account. The trustee said $12,000 is missing, and the bank records point to you." I swear to God, I laughed out loud because it was so absurd. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "I don't think it's funny," she snapped. "This is felony theft, Logan, your grandmother's legacy. You should be ashamed of yourself." I was stunned, frozen. My brain couldn't even process what she was saying. "I didn't touch her money," I said slowly, as if explaining it to a child. "Then how do you explain the wire transfer?" she asked. "What wire transfer?" I asked, but Linda hung up without answering. An hour later, my phone exploded with texts from cousins, aunts, even my own mother. "Why would you do this to Grandma? You need to return the money before we press charges. Don't bother showing up for Thanksgiving." I tried to call, but nobody picked up. I went to Mom's apartment, but she wouldn't even open the door. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family," she said through the peephole. "Just go." Just like that, I became the family outcast. I kept waiting for someone to ask me what really happened, to give me the benefit of the doubt, to say, "This doesn't sound like Logan. He took care of Grandma. He was there," but no one did. Brandon, meanwhile, went completely silent. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't even pretend to check in. And somehow, no one found that suspicious, so I did what any sane, falsely accused person would do. I requested the financial records from the estate lawyer, logged every transaction, and started tracing the digital footprint of that $12,000. What I found made my blood run cold. The estate lawyer had mailed me a packet with the final to records and a copy of the wire transfer logs. I don't think he expected me to comb through it line by line, but I was desperate, so I did. There it was, a transfer for $12,000 sent for days after Grandma died. It was authorized by a digital signature that wasn't mine, from a local IP address that, when I ran it through a friend's tech tools, mapped to an apartment complex in Evanston. Not my address, but Brandon's. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. Then I went back through my messages, digging up the awkward selfie he'd sent the family from his new place in Evanston that he was so proud of. I compared the date of that post to the date of the transfer. It was 2 days after he moved in. He had stolen the money after settling in and used Grandma's name and estate login to authorize it. And here's the kicker. Brandon had a degree in finance and had done an internship at a private wealth firm. He knew exactly how estate distributions worked and how to make it look clean. He thought no one would notice, and when someone did, he blamed me at first. I wanted to storm over to his condo and throw the evidence in his smug face. I wanted to punch that phony Rolex right off his wrist. I wanted to scream at Aunt Linda, make her eat every smug word she'd spit at me over the phone. But I didn't, because I realized something important. They wanted a monster. Brandon gave them one. They never stopped to ask if it was real. So fine, let them believe I'm the villain. For a while, let them choke on it instead of blowing up. I did something else. I went quiet. I didn't respond to texts or defend myself. I moved into a cheaper apartment, worked 2 jobs, retail during the day and rideshare at night. I even skipped Thanksgiving and Christmas that year. No awkward dinners, no glares across the table, no Aunt Linda whispering fake concern. But every spare hour I had, I documented everything. I made spreadsheets, printed copies of IP logs, highlighted account authorizations, downloaded public LinkedIn posts, and grabbed screenshots of Brandon's social media, bragging about his luxury condo and work-from-home startup consulting firm. Because you know what they say, receipts talk. And I wasn't just planning to clear my name. I was going to burn him down. It took almost 8 months to collect everything I needed. I consulted with a legal aid clinic downtown and found the lawyer who had just passed the bar and was hungry for a case. When I showed him the files, he blinked at me like I'd just handed him the script for a Netflix thriller. "Logan, this is theft. Straight up fraud. You can absolutely go to court with this," he said. "But can I win?" I asked. He looked at me dead serious. "You can do more than win. You can bury him." I filed suit in civil court for fraudulent misrepresentation and financial damages. I didn't tell anyone, not Mom, not my siblings, and definitely not Aunt Linda. The subpoena hit Brandon's condo like a missile on a Thursday morning in early June. Aunt Linda called me 3 hours later, breathless. "What the hell are you doing?" I was at work, so I calmly stepped into the break room and said, "Filing a lawsuit. What does it look like you're tearing this family apart?" She screamed, "No, Brandon did that. I'm just holding the flashlight," I replied. She hung up. Typical. Brandon hired a lawyer, of course a flashy one with an expensive suit and big promises. They tried to play it off like the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that maybe Grandma had intended to give him the money or that she mentioned it verbally. But I had the paper trail, the forged digital signature, the IP logs, the timestamps, and the smug Instagram post of him buying a flat-screen TV the day after the money hit his account. It took less than 4 court sessions for the truth to unravel. Watching Brandon squirm on the stand felt good, I won't lie. He looked like a scared kid. The confident, arrogant golden boy was gone. In his place was a man backed into a corner, with no more lies to hide behind. That the judge ruled in my favor. Brandon was ordered to repay the $12,000 plus interest and legal fees. The court called it intentional fraud with malice, which meant it would stay on his record for life. But that wasn't the end. When word got out and family members started talking, it didn't take long for the full picture to come into focus. Brandon had borrowed money from at least 3 other relatives over the years, money that mysteriously never showed up. The whispers became louder. Aunt Linda's reputation took a nosedive. She tried to hold a family meeting to spin the narrative, but no one came. Mom finally reached out. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I should have believed you. I didn't say anything because apologies don't unburn bridges, especially not the ones you lit yourself." The thing about people like Aunt Linda is they never believe consequences apply to them. Even after the court ruling, even after Brandon was publicly embarrassed and ordered to pay restitution, even after my name was legally cleared and the judge outright stated I had never accessed Grandma's accounts, Linda still acted like I was the problem. "We shouldn't have aired family business in court," she told my mom. "Logan should have come to us directly, come to you after you iced me out, called me a thief, and turned the whole family against me." Right, but she didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control. And now that her golden boy's halo had shattered, she needed someone else to blame, someone else to manipulate. The problem was, I wasn't the same person I'd been 3 years ago. I'd spent those years working double shifts, scraping by, and rebuilding my self-worth from the ground up. I'd sat alone on birthdays, eaten microwave dinners on Christmas Eve, and watched life go on without me while everyone believed I'd stolen from a dying woman. You don't live through that and come back soft. So, when Mom passed along Linda's suggestion that we all move past it for the sake of family, I gave a short, simple reply. "No." She called me that evening. "Logan, sweetie, I just think, Don't, sweetie me," I interrupted. A long silence. "Then your grandmother would have wanted peace," she said. That part made me laugh because if Grandma were alive, she'd have smacked Linda with her oxygen tank and handed me a slice of pie while doing it. She also would have wanted people to stop stealing her money, I said flatly. "What do you want, Linda?" And that's when it happened. Her voice cracked. She told me Brandon hadn't paid a dime yet, that he'd lost his job shortly after the ruling, and that his reputation in the Chicago finance world was damaged beyond repair. Apparently no one wants to hire a guy with a public fraud judgment. Who would have guessed? Worse, she'd co-signed his lease, his car, and his private student loans. In short, she was screwed, and she wanted me to forgive the debt, make a statement saying it was all a misunderstanding, and let Brandon off the hook so he could rebuild. I nearly dropped the phone from laughing. "You want me, the guy you disowned, slandered, and framed to fix the mess your son made after he destroyed my life?" "You're not being fair," she snapped. "No, Linda, I'm being precise. There's a difference." She started sobbing, for real this time, or maybe just louder. I didn't know, and I didn't care. All I could think about was the night I sat alone in a basement apartment eating instant noodles while the rest of them passed around turkey and wine and talked about how disappointed they were in me. Let her cry, I thought. She hung up after saying, "You'll regret this." But the only thing I regretted was not cutting them off sooner. Over the next few months, it all collapsed. Brandon defaulted on the repayment plan, and his wages were garnished. He had to break his lease and move back in with Linda, whose retirement savings had been drained trying to fix it. She sold her house. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I'd gotten promoted at work, finally had health insurance again, and had just started dating someone I actually saw a future with. She didn't know all the details yet, but she knew enough, and more importantly, she believed me. I even reconnected with my younger sister Maya, the only one who'd reached out after the court ruling and said, "I always had a feeling it wasn't true." We went for coffee, talked for hours, and laughed like we used to before all the drama. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. One night I came home from work to find a handwritten letter on my doorstep. It was from Brandon. No envelope, just folded notebook paper and messy handwriting I hadn't seen since we were kids. "I know, you'll never believe me, but I'm sorry," it read. I panicked. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just, I needed the money. And when Aunt Linda found out, she said you'd be the easiest person to pin it on. I never thought it would blow up like this. I'm so sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I lit it on fire in the kitchen sink and watched the ash swirl down the drain. Because sometimes closure isn't about forgiveness. It's about knowing the truth and choosing to move on anyway. I thought I was done with them. After everything, the lawsuit, the public embarrassment, Brandon's apology written in Sharpie on crumpled notebook paper, I truly believed that chapter of my life was closed. Then Aunt Linda got cancer. Stage 3, aggressive ovarian. That's what Maya told me. She'd been checking in on Linda occasionally, despite everything, because that's just who Maya is. Too good for her own damn good. She said Linda wasn't doing well, that the treatments were brutal. Brandon was trying to take care of her, but mostly just hiding in the basement, gaming, and avoiding bills. "She's not the same," Maya said quietly over coffee one day. "She talks about Grandma a lot. Says she regrets how everything went down." I didn't respond. I just stirred my Americano and watched the cream swirl. A week later, Maya texted again. "Linda's asking if you'll visit, just once. She wants to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put my phone down, turned off notifications, and didn't reply because the truth is, I didn't know what I owed her anymore. Closure, forgiveness, a final face-to-face, or nothing at all. 3 months passed, then she died. It was a quiet funeral, closed casket. Brandon gave the eulogy. I didn't go. Maya did, and she told me it was awkward. Half the family didn't show up, the other half acted like ghosts. Brandon apparently cried, but not many people bought it. A week after the funeral, I got a call from Linda's lawyer. She'd left me something in her will. I almost didn't go, but curiosity has a cruel way of dragging you into rooms you swore you'd never step foot in again. I met the lawyer at a tiny office downtown. He was a soft-spoken man in his 60s with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "She wrote it herself." We didn't open it. I took it home, sat with it, for an hour before opening it. The letter was short, handwritten like Brandon's had been, but far neater. "Logan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I finally saw it, all of it. What I let happen, what I encouraged, you were never the villain. You were the scapegoat I needed, because admitting my own son was capable of something so cruel, it broke me. I hope you build a life that is so bright, so full that no one can ever make you feel small again. Grandma was proud of you. She told me that once when you weren't around. I didn't want to believe her, but she was right. I left you something. It's not much, just something of hers. Something I should have given you a long time ago. I'm sorry, Linda." Folded inside was Grandma's locket. The gold one she wore every Sunday, engraved with the initials of all her grandchildren. When I opened it, I saw a tiny photo of me as a boy on one side, and on the other, one of Grandma and me together. I didn't even know that picture existed. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything settle into the silence. That night, I visited Grandma's grave for the first time in years. It was a cold March evening, windy, gray. I brought the locket and a single yellow daffodil, her favorite. I stood there and finally said everything I never got to say when they threw me out and smeared my name. All the times I needed her voice, and it wasn't there. All the nights I'd cursed the silence and wished just once someone had believed me. "I made it, Grandma," I said softly, "not because of them, in spite of them." I placed the locket on the headstone just for a minute. Then I tucked it into my coat pocket and walked away. That was a year ago. Today I own my own financial consulting firm. I built it from scratch with a couple of friends who believed in me when no one else did. We work with nonprofits and small businesses, people who've been screwed over by the big guys. Brandon, last I heard, moved out of state and took a customer service job in Florida. He filed for bankruptcy 6 months after Linda died. He still has a fraud judgment on his record and still blames unfair family drama. I don't care. I have peace now. I don't need revenge. I don't need apologies. I don't even need anyone to say they were wrong. I have my name back. I have my dignity. And I finally understand family isn't blood. It's not who shares your last name, it's who shows up when your world burns and says, I'll sit in the ashes with you. So, to anyone out there who has ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you the most, you are not alone, and you will rise even if you have to do it from the ground up.